Goodest morning, friends and family. It is Amy here with Ask a Christian, and
It is Mark with Amy from Ask a Christian. Got it out.
that's my favorite. We're gonna just remind you of two announcements today. And the first is that we have been doing prizes regularly. I think we finally have everybody who's going to claim having claimed them. So if you have not yet received your prize, I'm going to do another batch shipping this week. So anyway, they're coming. And then sometime in the middle of this presentation or at the end, we'll give away the grand prize, which is this nostalgia s'mores maker that I've been obsessed with since I tried it out at a friend's house. So we'll stay tuned for that. Just by way of review, you can see we are now on the 8th of 8th. So this is our final one. And we've talked about everything from where we get our sources to whether or not Jesus was a rebel religiously or societally. We looked at how there was something different about Jesus as a miracle worker, how he's got more staying power in the annals of history than, say, just a magician or somebody who's doing illusion or sleight of hand. And even more than some of the healers or men of faith at the time. So check those out if you didn't get to. And then we started on Thursday with our second set, which is took us through some other characteristics about Jesus, how he was in and out and politics of the day. We looked at his different kind of revolutionary love and leadership. Yesterday, we looked at Jesus' claim to divinity through what he was titling himself, Son of Man. And then today, we're going to look at what it meant to be Messiah and why more people didn't accept Jesus as Messiah. So there's a quick recap. And then lastly, I do want to let you know, if you have enjoyed hanging out with me and with Mark, I'm looking to do another kind of discussion group, probably February, March. I'm not sure yet, but if you're interested, would you sign up at this link, and I can send you more information as we get it in. Mark and I are reviewing schedules, this book, The Road, for material, and we will we'll let you know more when we've decided some stuff. So anyway, there's our updates, and we'll get into our discussion today, which I titled, what did I title it? Snake Crusher Christos at the last minute, because I was trying to find a way to work all ideas in. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to get into, I want to kind of just give you some Bible history in story form, because I want to look at the word Messiah, where that came from. If you were Hebrew, you would pronounce it more like Mashiach, but because most of us are not Hebrew, we'll go with the English transliteration, which is Messiah. And this word, we don't see it until later. It's because it's just the word for anointed. So we see anointed in the early part of the Jewish scriptures and the Christian Bible. And when we talk about anointed one, we mean someone who has oil poured on them, representing God pouring himself out on these people. So that happened to kings, that happened to Israel's priests. And basically it was a way of saying this person has been chosen for a specific mission for God. Someone who is anointed would be serving, protecting, leading God's people. So when we talk about Messiah, or the Greek word Christ coming from Christos, we're talking about someone who's simply anointed to do a special mission for God. And this is not in the early parts of the Bible or the Hebrew scriptures, as I mentioned, but we do see this concept. We do see this call out for somebody to come be the anointed one, to come do something for the people. So let me just kind of read through my notes for you and give you a flow of where the story's going. The first woman, Eve in Genesis, has been tempted by God's enemy in the form of a snake. That's a whole nother Bible discussion and a fun one. She has chosen to disregard God's law of love. It broke the universe. Whereas in the beginning of this story in Genesis, Adam and Eve are walking face to face, meeting with God. They have all the wonders of the world just a conversation away. There is now, because of sin, a veil between God and man. The relationship has also been broken. A property of God, His holiness, cannot be experienced full force by those who cling to sin. It would be like putting a plastic cup too near a bonfire. So it's not that God doesn't want to continue to commune with humanity. It's that there's something that they're holding on to that would not be able to exist in His presence. In this story, there is hope introduced. God communicates His plan to Adam and Eve. He's going to restore the universal law of love. And unfortunately, it's not going to be immediate. Another fun Bible study. Why couldn't God do it immediately? We can look at this in the context of Scripture at a later time if you're interested. But just take it from me for today. I'm painting this picture of the early story, that this restoration of God's law of love can't be immediate, but there is going to be someone who will come and crush the head of this snake. The same snake figure that tempted Eve, there's going to be someone who will come, and it says they will crush the head of the snake, but the snake will bruise the heel of the snake crusher. But this gives them hope. Now, the next pivotal moment in this scripture story is God choosing a man named Abraham. He makes a covenant and he says, through you, Abraham, and your lineage, I'm going to bless the world and restore it. So later, Abraham's son Judah also gets a promise that there's going to be a king from his line that will rock the world, filling it with blessings. In the meantime, God also sets up a system, and He explains to His people, the lineage of Abraham. He says, you know what? Our relationship has been broken, but I have a way that I can still dwell among you. Maybe not face to face like it was in the beginning, but because you want my presence and I so want to be with my people, here is the system. You're going to come to understand me through it. This system, not to throw too many words around, is called the sanctuary system or the tabernacle. And a lot of people wonder, why did Jewish people, why did Hebrew people do animal sacrifices? Well, it was a way of God saying, here is my plan. Ultimately, there's going to be someone come to destroy all sin and restore relationship. But in the meantime, I want you to learn about this relationship through the sanctuary system. We could get into details, but basically it asked the man of the household and sometimes later on the priest to take a perfect blemish-free lamb and offer them as a sin offering in place of them giving their life. So it's sort of a substitutionary thing. And I bring this up because it's important to this discussion of what Messiah is and who he was. So you have this. Go ahead.
So it's not that God just likes people slaughtering animals. It's to point to something. Because I think it always seemed as though this was just so unnecessary. But hearing it like this, as far as like, no, it's not to kill. If I'm correct, is what you're saying. It's not just to kill things. It's to remind people of what's coming or to kind of point to something else.
Absolutely. As a kid, this is one of the most horrific ideas I could imagine. And I remember just thinking like, okay, who wants to serve a God who does sacrifice? And it seems like he would just be another pagan god, this God of the Old Testament who demanded sacrifice and loved blood and, like all this crazy stuff. So again, a whole nother study. We could, take an hour on the system very easily, even just this part of the system. But yes, it was designed to say there is something better coming. We are going to restore the relationship. Here's how. It will require life, and sin is messy. Sin is sad. It has real universal consequences. So that was the whole point of the sacrificial system, not because they believed God gloried in blood or killing or anything like that.
Sorry for the distraction. I just.
No, it's a great one. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. So it's just easy. Teresa says here, I think it was also so people understood how horrible sin is. Absolutely. Like if you, as humans, if we can't see the consequence, we think there isn't one. But it's God's, this is Christian theology, right? So that's why it's a bit of, I guess, a trail off from what we're talking about today. So just so you know, I'm not trying to preach to you. I'm just explaining to you what the Jewish people would have thought of this story, and it's going to become important. So this sacrificial system explains to God's people how he's going to dwell among them, how it's going to be that they can communicate, how God's going to intercede, how he's going to restore the relationship. So they see every evil action, seen or unseen. They understand that this piles up in the universe. Now, the first king on the scene from the tribe of Judah, the first king who could fulfill this promise is David. And although he is anointed in some ways, he is definitely chosen by God to lead the people. He is not the one who ends up being the snake crusher. In fact, he has his own struggles with temptation. He has his own struggles with the snake of Genesis. His sons are also not snake crushers. In fact, they are not even close. It is a frustrating read when you read through the lineage of David, his kings. There's, of course, points of highlights where people are really acting well and kings are leading well. But overall, it just seems that humanity's on a downward spiral. So they go through cycles of prosperity, following after God, and then they forget him, turning to pagan gods, turning to their selfish ways, and adopting practices that God has explicitly told them. Don't do these things that the other nations surrounding you do. So they're on highs and lows, peaks and valleys, and nothing happens. The snake crusher does not come. The stage goes dark, and not a word from a prophet is heard for about 400 years. Now, this is just a side note, but if you look at a Christian Bible, you'll see a New Testament and an Old Testament and a New Testament. And in between those times is a period of several hundred years that there's no recorded word from God. And it's like the stage has gone dark. Humanity, the Jewish people, the Hebrew people feel like God has neglected them. And where is the snake crusher? And during this period, there start to be people who are looking for this Messiah, looking for this anointed one. The one who is both anointed to restore their relationship with God somehow gets mixed up with the person who is going to physically deliver Israel and bring them to the heights of power and glory that King David had when he was reigning. Does this make sense? So, what I want to figure out today is, first of all, what did some of these Old Testament prophets say that the Israelite people should be looking for in a coming Messiah, and what the world should be prepared for? And then after we hear that, we'll look at if Jesus believed he was that, and then we'll leave it to you to make up your mind whether or not Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. Okay, so I just wanted to pause just for a second and do the grand prize drawing. Leonie, if you would email me your address, I would love to ship to you the s'mores maker. All right.
Just like that. That was that.
That's just it. That's all. I know it's a little anticlimactic. Yeah. Email me.
No, I love it. No, I was just hoping that I had a chance to win it, but all right.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
When's your birthday? No. Well, all right, let's get back to this. So, what did the Old Testament prophets say about the coming Messiah? There are supposed to be 300 prophecies about the Messiah. As someone who's a little bit skeptically minded, some of those I read and I think, how did anyone ever think this was a prophecy and not just like some random reading? And knowing that once they believe prophecy was fulfilled, people did go back and say like, oh, this lines up and this lines up. So I realized that. Don't take me out for that. And some of them just seem really obscure to me. So I'm telling you that because I just picked ones that I thought were interesting, that were meaningful to me, but know that there are hundreds of them if you would like to study that out. Okay. So some of the ones that were clearer to me, Isaiah 11:1 talks about the Messiah will be a descendant of David. Again, on the skeptical side, alone, this is thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people. So it's not like all that. None of these standing alone are all that amazing. But, it does exclude some people. It's like playing Guess Who. Do you remember that game from when you were a kid when you knocked down all the guys? That was the coolest game and never available in my preschool. Someone was always using it. Hey, Human Meat Sack, just want to tell you your party balloons and you get a car. You get a car. You get a car. That's funny. I'll pop this one up from the FBI. Greed is strong. Pop this one up from M. Langston Howard. All right. So here, needed to be a descendant of David. It says he will be a scion of the house of David, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse. Who is Jesse? David's paw. Yeah.
Oh,
and a
I guess, of course, I guess I'm the only one that can really respond. My
bad. Well, people can type their answer.
David's paw. Big guy.
Yeah.
Paw. Daddy.
Yeah. And a branch shall grow out of his roots. The second one that was meaningful to me is that he would be born in Bethlehem. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Micah 5:2. I like that one. That one is a little provocative to me because it sounds like that coming forth is from old, from ancient days. A little allusion to the Ancient of Days, which is a name for God. And from of old sounds like, you're not just born, that there's some history there. So that one is fun and provocative. Number 3, I want to say up front that this third one is debated and requires its own deep digging. But I believe the Bible talks about Jesus. Well, look, I think it's Jesus, so we won't play, but the Messiah coming during a specific time frame. This is interpreted all sorts of different ways. I would love to take you through that. This is the kind of stuff that's going to be covered in our next discussion. But Daniel 9:24, check it out. It says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. We won't get into that today, but just know that it's possible that the scriptures outline a time frame for this Messiah to come, and that the time frame begins from a commandment to restore and build the city of Jerusalem. And then it's given a time frame, which at a later date, Mark and I can teach you how to look at that. And then it talks about Messiah the Prince ending up during this time frame. So some anointed one was supposed to show up at this time. Our Jewish friends will debate what that means, which is totally fair. But if you go through it and you find it fitting, then it's just another point of interest. Number 4, he would challenge with his words. Isaiah 11:4. This goes back to kind of the religious rebel that we talked about earlier. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. So it talks about this Messiah as a moral and religious leader person versus maybe a political or military leader. Maybe political. There's words involved in politics. But kind of differentiating the Messiah from some of the ones who were going to come and conquer by the sword. Number 5 on my list is that he would be a light unto the nations. Isaiah 42:6-7. So Isaiah said, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness. Got that old English here. I will hold thine hand and keep thee, and give thee a covenant for the people, for a light of the Gentiles. This is super interesting to me because we talked about Jewish insularity and thinking that they were chosen, but not losing sight of why they were chosen sometimes. This talks about the Messiah leading people back to that idea of inclusivity, of bringing light not just to the Jewish people, but to people outside the Jewish community, to bringing, these concepts of revolutionary love to others. Number 6, really particular, really pointed, he would arrive on a donkey. This one's cool. Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just, having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass. It's fun to say ass during religious talk. And upon the colt, the foal of an ass. So very interesting, because talking about him as a king, but a king bringing salvation. So again, different interpretations. Some people think that this is a military entrance. And then some people think that this is, a spiritual entrance of a king. Number 7, he would bear pain on behalf of humanity. This is probably the most famous Old Testament prophecy about the coming Messiah. Says, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. So this is probably the most agreed upon theme of who the Messiah is. There is this idea of someone suffering on behalf of his people. So this one is less controversial, though, of course, whether or not Jesus said that it was him or he fulfilled it is another story completely. But our Jewish friends definitely talk a lot about this Messiah who will bear the suffering of the people. All right. So as I mentioned before, I just want to drive this point home. In Judaism, the belief and the concept of the Messiah, who he is, what he was exactly supposed to do, is given to debate. Even to this day, it's not like this has been going on since old school times. Everyone has been debating, how do we interpret this? How do we interpret that? And as history changes, as the Jewish people's situation changes, some people were longing for and interpreting this as a military conquesting Messiah, and other people were interpreting this as mostly spiritual, bringing the people back to their state of holiness, of godliness. And some people are in the middle of the road, including both, and more or less. So sometimes there's, increased desire for that military leader, sometimes increased desire for getting out of spiritual oppression. All right. So why did people start to believe that Jesus was the Messiah? Well, first of all, some of these Old Testament prophecies clearly did apply to him. Some of them he made apply to him. Does that mean that they're any worse or better? What do you think? I mean, Mark, I don't know if we talked about it live, but we've talked about it before, that Jesus is like, hey, you guys go grab the donkey because I need to enter Jerusalem according to Scripture.
Oh yeah, there's a, not to go out. I mean, not to take you off, but yeah, I don't know how much time we can talk about it right now, but yeah, it was quite a setup. It wasn't. They definitely set this thing up quite well, and it wasn't accidental.
Right. So in my wanderings, I'm like, okay, well, if you want to appear to be the Messiah, then you just make sure you know the Scriptures and you do a lot of things that people believe the Messiah did. But opportunity has to be mixed with some of that too. Like, not everyone can just be like, oh, here's the perfect timing, gonna grab me a donkey. So, any one thing can be argued to the point where it has no impact.
I would say, for today, it's like, okay, well, the Messiah will come during a NBA finals between this team and that team. There are some things that are beyond your control. There are some things you can do to make sure that you're near a basketball arena. But if these other teams have not done their part, something like that, to line it up, if you're not there, it's like, okay, hey, some things you can manufacture, but there are a number of things that are outside of your control. That's like, okay, yes, manufacture, but also opportunity, and also, hey, things are lining up too perfectly for this to be happenstance.
Right. Yeah. So if you're familiar with some of the New Testament scriptures, I don't want to take the time to show you that all of these things are fulfilled, but just briefly, we do know that Jesus was a descendant of David. We do know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, even though he was from Nazareth. We do know that he came according to that specific time frame mentioned in Daniel. We do know that he primarily focused on changing the world through his words and actions, not trying to do military stuff. We do know that he was not only a light to the nations himself, but because of his followers' belief in him, Christianity has spread worldwide. And we do know that he arrived on the donkey. And we do know that he believed he was suffering for humanity. So we have a lot of fulfillment in the life of Jesus. So people started to believe, and certainly after the crucifixion, they started to believe. You might have heard the word Jesus Christ, and the term Christ or Christos wasn't as prominent until after his crucifixion, but then his disciples started calling him Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Anointed One. And so it was after his crucifixion that title really took off. But that's why they started believing, is because he was fulfilling some of the Old Testament things. And in fact, If you read any of Paul's speeches in the New Testament, you'll see that's his main jam. His whole point for waking up in the morning is to go explain to the Jewish people who he came from that you can believe this is the guy because of this, 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 and this. But we'll leave Paul out of the majority of this discussion. But that's just kind of like a summary. That's why people started to believe. So here is the New Testament. There's this record of a guy named Jesus who confronts evil. He keeps talking about this coming kingdom. And if you joined us night by night or session by session, you know that this was a great joy to interested Jews and some threat speech to Rome. If you joined us yesterday, you'll know that Jesus used a curious phrase to describe himself, and not just one, but many. He uses language from the sanctuary that we were talking about. He calls himself things Mark talked about, calling himself the bread of life. So he made these curious claims about himself that got people's attention. And then I want to specifically mention John 1:29. Have you read the Gospel of John? Some people think that it is the least accurate because it came later. Some believe it is the most accurate because it has some key differentiators, but enough crossover. There's a lot of interesting stuff around this too. But John the Baptist is a guy who's actually Jesus's cousin. He comes before Jesus, and he starts telling people that they need to follow Jesus. And when Jesus shows up, there's a big crowd, and John the Baptist says to the crowd, "Here is the Lamb who takes away the sin of the world." So this guy is introducing Jesus as the Lamb of that sanctuary message that we talked about earlier. That's why it was important for me to explain that, so that when we drop this, it makes sense. John was very, very clear about who he believed Jesus was. And John had a lot of followers. John had a lot of interest. And so when he said, "Hey, I know who this guy is. He is the anointed one, supposed to take away the sins of the world." In another time that people started believing Jesus might be this anointed one is he introduces himself as Messiah. In Luke chapter 4, really early on in this Gospel of Luke, it says, he went to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then Jesus rolls up the scroll and gives it back to the attendant, and he sits down. And this caused quite a stir in the synagogue. Luke 4:21 says, he began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Now, why am I taking particular time highlighting this one chapter and verse? Because Jesus, at the beginning of his ministry, is saying, the Lord has sent this anointed one to you. Today, it's fulfilled right in front of you. Now, I won't go into a whole long study on this, but this is significant because the literal Hebrew word for because used in that, he has anointed me. Oh, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me. Because there's two options to use it in Hebrew, and the because that Jesus chooses is a word pregnant with meaning. It's like exclamation points galore. It's like, pay attention to what I'm about to say. it would be like me talking to a group of students and saying, I need you to study really hard tonight because I'm giving you a test tomorrow. So it's always used to like bring drama. So it's an exclamation point saying, pay attention to this. So that exclamation point highlights the because he has anointed me. It's a little bit of one of those word twists that Jesus liked to do. Another thing is the reasons that people started believing in him as Messiah is because of what Mark talked about yesterday. He called himself the Son of Man. If you weren't with us yesterday, go check out Daniel 7:13, which talks about this anointed one coming and receiving power and authority from God to rule the earth. And then, of course, we talked about earlier miracles, healings, signs and wonders, all those things. People wonder why Jesus did them, why we don't see them as prevalently now. Those were for a specific reason. They were punctuating his claim as Messiah. It's like, oh, anyone could just come and grab a donkey and come into Jerusalem. So what makes you different? Okay, it's that you have done signs and wonders. So I know this is getting into the spiritual realm because those are things that we have difficulty backing up in history. But we do know from history that people believed he was doing those things. So we'll leave it at that. And then just again to reiterate, they did start to see him fulfilling some of these Old Testament things that they were looking for. Not everyone, though. So, Mark, anything to add before I go on to the next point?
Not yet.
Okay. I can't see you because I'm reading my notes. So if you're like,
oh no, I'm not. I'm me and him and me set on good dialogue. So no, I'm here.
All right. All right. No, I wasn't worried. I just thought.
Oh no. You rolled it out quite plainly. Like anything adding to it at this point would really just be redundant. That's part, yeah, you done it nicely.
All right. So those are the reasons why people did start to believe. But as you noticed, there's still Judaism and Christianity. I think like one of the coolest thoughts I ever had on my own was realizing that if all of the Hebrew nation, if all of the Jewish people decided that Jesus was Christ, then we wouldn't have Judaism anymore. If everyone had converted, it would have just been this straight lineage through to Christianity. It would have been, God's people raised up looking for Messiah, find a Messiah, follow Messiah. There wouldn't be Judaism and Christianity, but because the majority of Jewish people didn't accept Jesus, then we still have these different monotheistic religions. So anyway, so to be pointed, we know why other people thought Jesus was Messiah. Did he think there was a Messiah? Now, there are multiple reasons and multiple phrases Jesus said that would indicate that, but I want to just give you one for the sake of time. Or I want to look at one for the sake of time. We talked about our Bible history crush, Bart Ehrman, yesterday. Now, this is from his blog, but it is a shortened version of his book, How Jesus Became God. So I want to read this quote to you. You can look it up on ehrmanblog.org. Jesus claimed to be Messiah. Bart Ehrman says, yes, maybe not in the way that the Jewish people thought, maybe not in the way that the Christian people thought, but Jesus did claim to be Messiah. And here is the evidence. Let me read you Bart Ehrman's quote first. Jesus' proclamation was all about the coming kingdom of God. That's what he talked about all the time. There's a kingdom. You can be part of it. I'm the way. He was an apocalypticist who believed that God would soon intervene in the course of history, overthrow the forces of evil, and establish a good and very real political kingdom here on earth. Now, this is Bart. This is not Amy. But yes, Jesus believed he was the Messiah. He believed that God was going to intervene and set up a kingdom. His listeners had to turn to God in preparation for this imminent end. So according to our Bible scholar Crush Bart, he did believe that he was the Messiah of sorts, of some kind of sort. So the reason that Bart gives in this book that we can know he was teaching that comes from one very likely, very historical note. So there's a high level of certainty around this talk, and it's found in the Gospels. Matthew 19:28, you can find it in Luke as well, but Matthew 19:28 is where I'm reading from. Jesus said to them, this is Jesus talking to his disciples. Truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Why do we believe this is a high level of certainty? Well, because Christians don't like it, and it's too far against Christian ideals, and I'll tell you why. Jesus is talking to the 12 here, including Judas. And what do we know about Judas? That was the guy that betrayed him. So if Jesus is telling the 12, including his betrayer, that they're going to be a part of ruling his kingdom, you can see how Christians would kind of be like, no, not Judas. That's the guy we hate. Boo. So if it's included in the Bible and it's against what Christianity would think or teach, especially early Christianity, then they like it. So it's a little contradictory. Like, will Judas rule on a throne? But they scholars believe that statement and that is very historically solid. So there would be 12 rulers on thrones. And then who would be the king? It sounds like Jesus is saying, since he's the one that chose the 12, then he is going to teach and rule the 12 like the Son of Man. That's what we talked about yesterday. Who's the Son of Man? The one who has authority over all this kingdom. So Bart Ehrman is making the argument, and I agree with him, that this is indicative of Jesus saying, like, yeah, I'm setting up some kind of sort of kingdom, and those of you who follow me are going to be part of the rulership. Does that make sense? I hope so. If not, you can hit me up later. We can talk more. Now, Bart thinks that Jesus was talking about this earth only. And that's where maybe because of, my Christianity, I'm going to separate from him. I absolutely believe that Jesus was teaching that this world will be made new. I also believe that he was talking about his spiritual kingdom and that law of love that we've been talking about, that he's interested, that rulership in our heart of hearts. So I believe he was saying he was going to be Messiah on earth, but I believe that he's talking about the earth made new, not the current political scene. So that's where we would maybe talk and get into some more theological discussion. Okay. So if Jesus thought that he was the Messiah and was teaching that, if people started following him, believing he was the Messiah, why the big resistance from our Jewish brothers and sisters? Well, this is subjective. Ask 10 Jewish friends and you might get 10 different Jewish answers of why Jesus didn't add up for them. But that's the crux of it. The crux of it is, yes, Jesus seemed to have fulfilled some of these prophecies as you interpret them. So there are different interpretations and different reasons for reading it. Does Jesus add up for many of them? Yes, even to our Jewish friends, he does fulfill many of them. But there are a couple things that in the Jewish mentality would not have allowed them to easily see Jesus as Messiah. One of them is that love for the rules and the laws. We've been talking about several times in a row about the Jewish desire to protect the nation by putting up laws that would please God, right? Because they had been taken over and conquered so many times because they had not been following God's ways and commandments. So they started piling on lots of laws around the laws, saying, not only do you worry about these 10, but because we want to serve God with all our hearts. Very good sentiments. We're going to do even more than that. We're going to line it out. And so when you get into that mentality of thinking that these things are so important to your nation and to your salvation, that when somebody like Jesus comes and appears to be shrinking the rule of law, like we talked about yesterday, love the Lord your God, love his people. On these two things hang all the laws and prophets. He's summarizing them. He's not reducing them, but to their minds, oh my goodness, he's just wiping out, burning and slashing all these rules and laws that we believe would bring us closer to God. He can't be the Messiah. He's a lawbreaker. So that mentality is a big one. Another one, this is not studied necessarily. This is from discussions with friends. Another one is that he was not supposed to have a second coming at all. No promise of the second coming necessarily in the Old Testament. Some of my Jewish friends believe, but that he was supposed to come once, set up his kingdom of peace, and it would never be questioned. So some people, Jesus couldn't be that because that's not how it worked out. And then really just various expectations about what the Messiah was going to look like weren't met for some of the Jews at the time. They expected a political ruler. As I said, sometimes they were expecting a military conqueror, a great priest who ruled God's people with God's law. So they're thinking all of this Old Testament Tanakh imagery. And he doesn't show up like that. He's supposed to come with grandeur, with power, with authority. And Jesus showed up kind of the opposite. Although he did speak with authority, he was a Jewish peasant. I put rural redneck vibes. I mean, he's from a no import town. Itinerant Jewish preacher. And frankly, he was on the wrong side of the law and executed for his efforts. That doesn't feel right to the Jewish concept of Messiah. And also, instead of crushing God's enemies, who they believed was the Roman Empire, he was crushed by them. So as many good things as he did, or miracles or whatever, he still wasn't inside what they believed he was going to show up as. So, all right. Back to the beginning of this story. I really sympathize with Judaism. I totally can switch my mindset over there and just be like, yeah, obviously Jesus did not fit the bill. Because if you believe the Torah, or the first portion of the Bible, is all about the Jewish nation, if you believe that that is telling the story of Hebrews and their relationship with God and your nation's history, then you might be looking for a Messiah to restore your nation's history. You see yourself as kind of the center of the story. Then you're looking for a Jewish Messiah to do Jewish Messiah things, and maybe forgetting the beginning of the story, which is before there were Jews, there were humans. So if you think that the story of the Bible is bigger than that, if it's the birth of humanity, the growth of humanity, the relationship with the Creator God, and his eventual restoring of humankind to the presence and understanding of God through the lineage of the Jews, then you might believe that the snake crusher has already come. So, of course, there are other options. We are short on time, but you can see how, you can sympathize. You can see why people didn't and why people did. It's an interesting study. Mark, what do you have to add? I see your comment. I'm going to pop it up.
Well, I think ultimately, it's, when it comes down to what has been presented, I think it's C.S. Lewis who says, at the end of the day, you can't really have like a gray area about Jesus, or not a gray area. Either you're like, look, this guy's a liar, and it's a quote we all know, as in, look, he knew what he was saying was wrong, and he was basically the greatest fraudster in history, and the one who had like the biggest return on his fraud. Either he's a liar or he's a lunatic, and that, okay, he actually believed this stuff, but look, he was sincere, but he was also sincerely wrong, and so everybody who follows him is crazy. Or if he's not a liar, if he's not crazy or a lunatic, basically, then it's like, all right, then you guys say, look, this guy was talking, what he was accurate, and he actually is Lord, he actually is God, and he actually had a mission that he came out and that he accomplished what was asked of him, or what he decided to do before eternity. And so it's like, basically, once you determine that in your own head, the implication is, okay, so basically, where do you go from there? Like I said,
Yeah.
as you said before, Amy, we know where we fall. I don't think Jesus was a liar. I think his sincerity shines through as far as the sort of leadership model that you showed before. I don't think Jesus was crazy, in that there are too many instances of people being with him, and I think him talking too coherently, and also him being sincere once again. And so for me, it leaves only the last option, that Jesus was who he said he was, or is who he said he is. And then, like I said, I know where it leads me. I think I have more reason to believe than not to believe, but that's me.
Right. We've been frank about us being Christians the whole time, but
Yeah.
We do know that some people require way more study, way more proof. We want to encourage you to keep studying into Jesus. Fascinating figure. And history bears out that, there are a lot of things different about him, and he's worth looking into because, and I will say, like, I used to think that there was a fourth option, that he wasn't necessarily a liar. He was just mistaken. But then the more I thought, like, okay, well, you would have to be mistaken pretty hardcore, and then you would end up being crazy. So if Mark's statement sounded like a little bit too harsh, C.S. Lewis says liar, lunatic, or Lord. So if you think lunatic's a little too strong, but that maybe he was just deceived or whatever, then, you could possibly work in a fourth option, but it kind of comes down to the same three. Like, lunatic sounds strong, but he, you might think he could have just been deceived about his calling. And then you're thinking, okay, well, what's deceiving him? He's making this stuff happen if he's deceived.
Okay, so let's go with crazy, cricket, or Christ.
Crazy, cricket, or Christ. I like it. Yeah. So, in summary, it appears that Jesus did believe that he was the Son of Man, as in, divine. And it does appear that he was teaching he was some kind of Messiah. And, whether he believed he was setting it up on earth or heaven, if we were going to go a ninth in this series, we would probably look at that. But we, yes, we love the alliteration too. But anyway, Mark and I know where we are. We'd love to talk to you more about this as an invitation to hit us up for online study. Many of you have asked questions in private, and some of you, like my friend Human Meatsack, love to ask questions in public. for which we are grateful. We love the discussion.
Absolutely.
And if you guys want to keep this going, you know how to get a hold of us. You can hit me up at askachristianfriend@gmail, below the video comments. That's probably the worst place to put it because they get lost over on Facebook as well. And I'm just glad that you came along with us for this discussion. Mark, closing thoughts?
Amy, thank you for inviting me to the space. I definitely enjoyed it. The things that either I was reminded of or learned in prepping for this and prepping alongside you. And like you said, just grateful for the people that have come on, and especially, like I said, like you said, the public questions, human meat sack. I like the pushback. And so everybody else, yeah, I don't think that we are called to stop our thinking if we do choose to believe something else. I think that God wants us to do our best thinking and be, okay, then is this reasonable? And if not, then what else is there? And if it is reasonable, then what else might we misinterpret? So, Amy, I'm just thankful that you invited me to this space. So I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who is with us along the way.
Yeah, thank you guys. All right, we're going to end this for now, and hopefully we'll see you back in February or March for our next one. It was a blast. Bye for now. Bye.